Yixuan comes not only with a new element, but also brings a new class to the game, Rupture. So today we will cover literally everything you need to know and answer every question about Yixuan you might have. This video will be extremely in-depth and the most lengthy one I have ever done. So get yourself a cup of tea or coffee and settle in. Let's talk about her kit and how she plays, her new and unique element and the new class, her best weapons, disk drives and disk drive sets, her combos, her main and substats, her teams and Mindscapes, and lastly, let's also talk about her pros and cons. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zenless Zone 0 Season 2. I am Rivenous and this is your complete XXL in-depth guide to Yixuan. Yixuan is a Rupture type Auric Ink on-field DPS, and if you didn't understand what I just said, don't sweat, we will go over it. Rupture is the new class being introduced in Season 2, and Rupture type agents have something special about them. Their abilities do not scale off their attack stat, but instead of Sheer Force, a new stat which is exclusive to Rupture type agents and effectively replaces pen ratio. These attacks will also deal sheer force damage, and said sheer force damage will always ignore 100% of the enemy defense. In turn, that means defense threat and pen ratio are effectively useless for Rupture agents. So how do you get sheer force? By default, there are currently 4 ways in the game of how you can obtain sheer force. First, 30% of the Rupture type character's attack stat will be converted into sheer force. This means, for example, if you have 1000 attack, you will also have 300 sheer force. Secondly, and this one is exclusive to Yixuan, 10% of her max HP will also be converted into sheer force. So if you have 10,000 HP, you also will gain 1000 sheer force. Some W engines are also able to provide sheer force, and lastly, of course, we have buffs. Agents such as Panyan can simply provide a sheer force buff to you. Sheer force can exclusively be used on Rupture agents and is a completely dead stat on agents of other classes. It is also not obtainable from sub or main stats. Both the attack and HP conversion are a real-time conversion, and this means that, for example, Astra's 1200 flat attack buff will also grant you 360 sheer force. Lastly, Rupture agents also do not have energy. They possess a new unique resource called Adrenaline, which effectively behaves the exact same as energy does, except it doesn't profit off energy regeneration, which makes ER a dead stat on Rupture agents. Adrenaline generates at a flat rate of 2 adrenaline per second, and Yixuan has some unique ways of obtaining adrenaline by other means as well, but more on that later. That also means that EX specials from Rupture agents require adrenaline instead of energy. Lastly, as per usual, basic attacks restore adrenaline as well. That is everything you need to know about the Rupture class, so let's quickly talk about Yixuan's unique element, Auric Ink. Auric Ink behaves very similarly to Frost, where it is a sub-element, but in this case of Ether instead of Ice. Auric Ink triggers corruption just like Ether does, but it also can disorder with Ether. It will also deal Ether damage, and generally do Auric Ink agents behave the exact same as Ether agents do, which means effectively she is simply Ether version 2. And knowing that, let's cover her kit. She has quite a lot going on, and while it sounds more complicated than it is, please bear with me here. I know that it is a lot. We will try to simplify what she does, so let's start with her core skill. Her core essentially tells you that 10% of her HP is converted into sheer force, it explains what sheer force and sheer damage are, and that your abilities deal said sheer damage and scale off said sheer force. You also gain 10 adrenaline whenever you trigger the Auric Ink anomaly, but at most once per 10 seconds. Furthermore, every perfect dodge will provide you 5 additional adrenaline as well, and 67% of your adrenaline consumed is then converted into technique points, which is yet another unique resource of Yixuan. Her technique point resource is kept at a maximum of 120. Let's quickly talk about her resources while we are at it. Since adrenaline effectively replaces energy, her energy bar here represents your current adrenaline instead. Right below that are your current technique points, and the little yin and yang symbol next to your technique points is your Auric Ink point. It also will glow yellowish orange and spin when you have one. So what is an Auric Ink point? Well, if you have 120 talismans, you will get access to a second ultimate. Yes, she has two. Using said second ultimate will then also grant you said Auric Ink point, and what exactly it is used for we will cover in just a bit. Lastly, Yixuan also gains a 60% damage bonus on a lot of her attacks. For her additional ability, we require either a stun, defense or support character. Unfortunately, this condition is incredibly easy to fulfill because her additional ability is not only really good but also quite important. Whenever any teammate uses an ultimate, she will recover 20 adrenaline over 10 seconds, and when she is switched out into a perfect assist, she will cast a thunderbolt which deals sheer damage and also generates 5 adrenaline. Furthermore, she gains an additional 30% damage bonus on 2 out of her theoretically 5 EX specials, more on that later, and casting any of her 2 ultimates will also increase her crit damage by 40% for 15 seconds. And with that, we have only talked about her core so far. I know it is a lot, but please bear with me. Yixuan features also a 5-part basic attack, and because she is an on-fielder, you will use this a lot. More on that during the combo section. Holding her dodge button without any movement input, this is important, will then cast her basic attack Inkwell Cloud Coalescence, which deals AoE damage and will also automatically follow up with her basic 5 when finished. This will be an integral part of her optimized damage combo and also is a great way of grouping multiple enemies. No, really, just look at this, it is probably the #1 best grouping we have in the game right now. As already mentioned, she also has 2 ultimates. The first ultimate requires, as per usual, 3000 decibels, deals a good amount of damage and will also evenly redistribute the HP of the team between all teammates. The second ultimate requires instead 120 of her technique points, which we know we can acquire by spending adrenaline, which also deals a good amount of damage and evenly distributes the HP of the team as well. And lastly, also grants us said 1 Auric Ink point. This ultimate ability will also be prioritized over her normal ultimate when this condition is met. So let's answer, what do we need the Auric Ink point for? Well, holding the dodge button while also inputting any movement will have her enter this cool movement state. And if we have said Auric Ink point, tapping basic attack during this movement mode or simply holding dodge outside of this mode without any movement input will then cast an enhanced version of her basic attack Inkwell Cloud Coalescence called Auric Array, which will channel for 3 seconds as well and restores 21 adrenaline during this time while dealing AoE damage. At the end of the cast, she will automatically unleash an basic attack Qingming Eruption. This attack behaves essentially the same as her basic attack Inkwell Cloud Coalescence and is effectively just a stronger version of it. Both her basic attack Inkwell Cloud Coalescence as well as the enhanced version can be cast following any other attack input, and because the animation is extremely long, we will want to immediately swap cancel it. Anyway, we will skip her assist follow-up, dash attack, quick assist, chain and dodge counter because they all do what they are supposed to do, and instead let's talk about her, at least in theory, up to 5 EX specials. Her first EX special, Ink Manifestation, costs us 40 adrenaline and can and should be used to parry enemy attacks because doing so will refund 10 adrenaline. You can either press the EX special button for an immediate parry if timed well, or hold the EX button to charge it up and parry a bit later. When let go, it will then cast a wing up attack, and if the skill has been either fully charged or successfully parries an attack, it will deal additional damage. It should also be noted that this EX special can even parry red flash attacks. Regardless, we can press her EX special again to follow up with a wing up attack with EX special Celestial Cloudlets, and we can press it for a third time at the additional cost of 20 adrenaline to follow up yet again with a special EX version of her basic attack Qingming Eruption. This essentially boils down to, press or hold EX to parry, then press EX twice more, or in other words, simply smash your EX button. One more important matter about her EX special here is that a successful parry is also considered as triggering a perfect block. To cast her 4th and 5th EX special, we can hold the basic attack button to channel her EX special Cloud Shaper, which will consume up to 60 energy, 20 for the initial activation and up to an additional 40 energy over time. At the end of the channel, it will then automatically be followed up with her EX special Ashen Ink Becomes Shadows. Actually a really fantastic name, by the way, that just sounds dope as fuck. Anyway, both of her 2 skills will deal 30% more damage when the enemy is stunned, and because of that we want to use it during the enemy stun window. This EX special can technically trigger a vital view dodge if timed correctly when the enemy attacks, but we are better off using this during the stun window and refer back to our first EX special or dodge counter to handle parries and enemies' attacks. Lastly, the smoke ball will also stay at the initial location of the enemy when first cast, which means if the enemy isn't stunned, they can technically move out of it. Especially with Pompeii, that can be a pain in the ass, so yet again another reason to not use it outside of the stun window. And that honestly mostly covers her kit. I know this is a lot to take in, so let's make a quick summary of how this entire kit plays out in practice. Because we are aiming for a total of at least 2, but possibly up to even 3 EX special Cloud Shapers during the stun window, we want to aim for 102 to 120 adrenaline to even enter the stun window. During the stun window, we want to use 2 or 3 EX special Cloud Shapers, her Decibel ultimate and 2 chains. Outside of the stun window, we want to on-field her as much as possible, utilizing her dodge, switch parries and EX special blocks to get as much adrenaline and technique points as possible. Her technique point ultimate we use whenever available, and whether or not that is during or even outside the stun window depends a lot on your team and how you play, but more on that later during the combo section. Let's finish her kit with her skill priority, which will be core, special and chain, into dodge and basics, into assist. Since we basically use all of her kit pretty frequently, she is not necessarily a cheap investment, and I would recommend leveling all skills at least up until level 10. Before we get into her combos, I want to give a huge shout out to my editor Morty, who gave everything imaginable for this video. We worked for over 3 weeks on this. Please give him some praise in the comments. Thank you. I hope you got a pen and paper, because Yixuan has a lot of combos with a lot of nuance, and this section will also take a while. But before we get into her actual combos you will find yourself using in practice, let's have a quick recap of how some of her abilities are linked. Her quick assist and dodge counter both connect into her basic 4, and her basic 5 connects into a dash attack, which then connects back into her basic 3, and that simply means we could loop it from there. All of her EX specials as well as her assist follow-up directly link into her dash attack, and that yet again means we could loop it from there as well. Casting her second ultimate at the cost of 120 technique points will grant us 1 Auric Ink point. We can use this Auric Ink point by long pressing the dodge button to replace her basic attack Inkwell Cloud Coalescence with its enhanced version, which will also restore said 21 adrenaline for us, deal increased damage, and is then automatically followed up by her basic attack Qingming Eruption. We can also optimize and further integrate this into our stun combo if we want to just slightly optimize it. One final note on her Auric Array, cancelling the animation will also prevent her from continuing to restore adrenaline, but the projectile will linger and she will also hence continue to deal damage at least. And with that out of the way, let's talk about how we actually play her outside the stun window, and we will want to make sure to use her held dodge basic attack for an optimal damage output per second for the time spent on field. Her optimal combo in this regard would be quick assist or dodge counter into basic 4 into basic attack Inkwell Cloud Coalescence into basic 5. However, as seen in the footage, we want to instantly swap cancel the Inkwell Cloud Coalescence and on-field another character in the meantime, which allows us to get a lot of additional damage from off-field. If we have her Auric Ink point, this combo would not actually change, but we essentially just gain 21 adrenaline and a little bit more damage for free. There are also other variations of this, but regardless of which one of these you choose, all of them are much better in terms of MV per second than simply mashing her basic attack. The reason why the aforementioned combo wins out, however, is because her basic 4 frames actually become much shorter, in fact by about half a second. Regardless, pause if you need to. It should also be noted that her basic attack Inkwell Cloud Coalescence can be cast after most other inputs and not only after her basic 4, but being able to loop our previous combo of Quick Assist into basic 4, Inkwell Cloud Coalescence and B5 is still one of the more efficient ones. This also unfortunately means Astra is yet again her current best teammate if you want to optimize this. I also want to mention it is probably better to not use this combo if you cannot actually do something meaningful with your other character on field during this time. And if all of this is too complicated for you or you simply wanna mash buttons, a simple quick assist or dodge counter into basic 4 and 5 will do its job. It is effectively worse than the other options, but also much more comfortable to play and does not rely on Astra as much. If we are about to be attacked with a parryable or even a red flash attack and we have at least 40 adrenaline, optimally 60 however, we go for her EX special Ink Manifestation parry into the follow-up into the Qingming Eruption. Or in other words, press EX 3 times, but keep in mind that the last EX special costs an additional 20 adrenaline. Again, technically this can also be used to parry a red flash attack at the same effectiveness, but we would prefer to dodge for the additional 5 adrenaline over using our EX special for this case. Regardless, her EX specials have a shit ton of iframes, so that is something to be noted, especially versus very aggressive enemies which follow up with a lot of attacks after the first one. You will need to use this combo 2 times to hit 80 technique points, which will then become relevant for our stun combo later. I would also recommend to swap cancel the Qingming Eruption at the end as it is quite long. And with that said, let's prepare for our stun combo. Holding her basic attack pressed while we have at least 40 adrenaline will cast her EX special Cloud Shaper, which will consume 20 adrenaline for the activation and an additional 40 over 2 seconds when fully channeled. When fully channeled or aborted, she will then automatically follow up with a detonation. Both of these skills deal 30% additional damage when the enemy is stunned, and that is the reason why we want to use this during the enemy stun window. It is also much better to fully channel it in terms of adrenaline to damage conversion, so we would want to have 60 adrenaline for this one. And having all this knowledge, we can now talk about the first of her 2 stun combo variations, and this one requires us to optimally have a full 120 adrenaline. You might have also asked yourself when to use which ultimate, so let's tackle this question first. We want to use her technique point ultimate before the stun window, essentially press it whenever it glows. We will then gain 1 Auric Ink point from that, and whether or not we keep this one depends on if you play with manual chain or not, and if you do, we keep it since we would really like the up to additional 21 adrenaline. As soon as the enemy becomes stunned, we open with a full channel of her EX special Cloud Shaper. If you play without manual chain, we swap cancel the detonation here. If you play with manual chain however, we now instead go for her enhanced basic attack Auric Array and swap cancel the animation into a chain with an ally. We also want to wait for the chain bar to tick down here and press it in the last second to gain 14 instead of 7 adrenaline. Now we trigger the chain using an ally, use Yixuan's chain, then cancel the chain and go for a second full channel of her EX special. We swap cancel the detonation here yet again, re-trigger the chain with an ally and go for a second chain on Yixuan. Now we use her Decibel ultimate, and after her ultimate we can channel her EX special Cloud Shaper for a third time for as long as possible. Depending on possible deadly assault buffs, which might increase our adrenaline generation, we are able to get a full 3 EX special channels in here. However, the timing is very tight, and if you run out of time, make sure to cancel the EX special early to get the detonation in before the stun window ends. If we can also use an ally ultimate to retrigger the chains, do so, as it will provide us with additional adrenaline over time. For her second stun combo, we will require both ultimates. We will still press her technique point ultimate whenever we can outside the stun window, but with good resource management we are able to get her technique point ultimate early enough to get it back up during the stun window again. Since we now cast her ult twice, we do not require as much adrenaline, or possibly even as low as 72 is possible. This depends a lot on whether or not you use an ally ultimate and trigger an Auric Ink anomaly during the stun window however. The safe breakpoint is 102 and we will also require at least 80 technique points for this. We open the stun window the exact same as before and generally it is the same as our previous combo, with the difference being that we can now cast her technique point ultimate before or right after her decibel ultimate instead of doing a third EX special channel. Which stun combo you choose ultimately depends on you, as it is very dependent on how you play and which team you play her in. I also do want to mention Jufufu being able to increase the decibel limit and refund decibels upon ultimate use will likely make these combos a little bit awkward, since you could possibly overcap on decibels and saving up her ultimate for the stun window might result in you simply wasting damage. This however is not something I've been able to test as of right now, and I will make a follow-up video on this when Jufufu releases if it turns out to be wrong. To finish off the combo section, I want to emphasize that you can smash your buttons and use your ultimates whenever available, basically ignoring all of the stun combos I just gave you, as long as you abide by the basic mechanics of keeping some adrenaline for her during the stun and using your EX to parry attacks. You will not notice necessarily a significant drop in score compared to completely optimizing her gameplay to the maximum. All of this is mainly to provide you with a diverse view on how you can optimize specific parts of her combat if you choose to do so. And with that said, let's get to the weapons. With Yixuan being a Rupture class agent and Rupture being a new class at that, her choice of weapons are, well, very limited. In fact, there are currently only 4 weapons for Rupture agents as of right now, and one of them is a B rank, which is worse than the craftable A rank. So we will not talk about the B rank. But also because the others are new, let's talk about what they do. The Puzzle Sphere is a craftable A rank Rupture Vengeance which provides 594 attack and 25% attack percent. Using an EX special will increase the crit damage by 25.6%, and if the target's HP is below 50% of its max HP, the damage dealt by EX specials is also increased by 32%. But because this W engine requires the enemy to have less than 50% max HP for an optimal damage output, it is much worse in Deadly Assault, and even more so if you cannot aim for a 60k clear. Radio Wave Journey is the Battle Pass Vengeance and provides 25% HP and 594 base attack. When using a chain attack or ultimate, it will then grant 1 stack of a buff up to 3, and each stack grants up to 128 cheer force, or in other words 384 in total. And lastly, we have Yixuan's signature. It provides a massive 743 base attack, 30% HP, 20% crit rate, and using an EX special grants 1 stack of Qingming Companion, with each stack increasing ether damage and ether shear damage from ultimate and EX specials by 8 and 10% respectively, stacking up to 2 times. As shear damage is a separate multiplier to damage percent, this is a big reason why her signature is so much ahead of other options. As everyone expected, her signature is her best in slot, and in the short span of 7 months you might have an R5 Radio Wave Journey, which would be her next best option, though not by much. If that is worth $50 to you, up to you I guess. Until then, I want you to consider the new craftable W engine, as it is, well, literally the only other option which isn't set B rank, and that to be fair would be even worse. With her signature providing 20 crit rate, that also makes her significantly easier to build compared to the other options. And speaking of which, let's cover her main stats. A standard layout of crit damage in slot 4, ether damage in slot 5 and HP percent in slot 6 give her the highest damage nearly regardless of her teams. But HP percent in slot 5 can come pretty close, especially if paired with Jufufu or Panyan and Astra with their signature weapons. At this point, choose whatever has better substats. Attack percent in slot 5 works as well, but it is just a bit off. If you do not run her signature weapon, crit rate in slot 4 can be a worthy consideration, as obtaining crit rate on her might become a little bit more difficult. But if you have an unfettered game ball, that is the Battle Pass support W engine, on your Astra for example, crit damage is still the best choice. Lastly, pen ratio is a completely wasted stat on her, so don't even consider it. It is up to a 20% damage loss between ether damage and pen ratio after all. As for her substats, generally speaking, crit values will be your best bet, but HP percent or even attack percent are not wasted either. Generally, I would recommend crit values over HP percent and attack percent over flat HP and flat attack. With her only damage source being sheer damage, which ignores all defense by default, flat pen is a wasted and hence actually completely useless stat as well. She also does not really proc anomalies too well, so anomaly proficiency is not necessarily a good choice either. Lastly, for her disk drive sets, the new set Yunqui Tails is her best on slot piece and pairs well with a 2-piece woodpecker for the ease of build in terms of crit rate. If you have enough crit rate substats, a 2-piece Astral Voice or Hormone Punk, 2-piece Chaotic Metal or 2-piece Branch and Blade Song are good choices as well however. If you run Astra with Unfettered Game Ball, you can easily run any of these choices and possibly be ahead of Woodpecker by just a bit. A 4-piece Woodpecker is another choice if you do not have a 4-piece Yunqui Tails yet, and while you can obtain and maintain 3 stacks outside of the stun window pretty easily, you will fall back to 1 or 2 stacks during the stun window, which makes up for a large portion of her damage. While 4-piece Woodpecker is an inferior choice, it is likely the next best option on her if you do not have a good enough 4-piece Yunqui Tails yet. In regards to Chaotic Metal, unfortunately Yixuan's anomaly application is subpar at best, and due to Ether and Auric Ink having separate anomaly bars, running Astra or even Nicole would not necessarily result in a good uptime on the set either. I guess technically Vivian works, but then you would need to play Vivian. While you can plan around it, I found it to be too inconsistent. At this point I also want to mention that the 4-piece Yunqui Tails provides 10% sheer damage bonus, and with sheer damage bonus, again actually being a separate multiplier to damage bonus, that makes this set hence a lot stronger than other options. Let's quickly cover her Mindscapes before we talk about her teams. Let's talk about her Mindscapes, and truthfully her Mindscapes are honestly pretty good and sometimes even better than on paper. Her M1 grants her 10% additional crit rate, which makes building her much easier. She will also start combat with 120 talismans, which allows you to open with her talisman ult and hence a 40% crit damage boost. Furthermore, she will also cast Thunder Strikes every 6 seconds, which generate 5 adrenaline each, which means up to 30 Thunder Strikes per deadly assault run, or in other words, 150 adrenaline per run for free. This free adrenaline should honestly not be underestimated and can help massively with your resource management, and easily allows for 1 or 2 additional EX specials outside or even during the stun window. These additional EX specials will also lead to another ultimate, which essentially means you not only get 30 Thunder Strikes, but also 2 EX specials and 2 additional ultimates from this. As for her M2, oh boy. First of all, it essentially unlocks a 6th EX special for you, which you can cast once after using her Talisman ultimate, which will then deal 1200% sheer damage. Hoyo really thought she doesn't have enough skills yet. Secondly, casting her first ultimate during the stun window will then also extend the enemy stun duration by 3 seconds, and she also gains a 15% ether rest shred on her ultimates and EX specials on top of that. If you have her M2, you want to press the basic attack button at the end of her EX special detonation to trigger her new M2 EX special. Because this is considered an EX special, it will also profit from the 15% ether damage shred as well as the 60% damage bonus from her core. Her M3 and M5 exist, and her M4 reads better than it actually is, because we have already 90% damage bonus from both her cores on these skills, as well as possible teammate buffs, as well as possible deadly assault buffs, or shield defense for that matter. Adding an additional up to 60% to that does not actually change that much in comparison. Lastly, her M6 allows you to obtain an additional technique point ultimate whenever we cast her normal ultimate, which we can cast at the very end of our stun rotation, and on top of that she also gains an effectively permanent 20% sheer damage bonus as well. As of her release, Yixuan has a few available teams, but she is honestly still looking for her best in slot team, which likely and hopefully will be Jufufu, who can provide days from off-field to allow for more on-field time for Yixuan, as well as help out with decibels to guarantee a good and consistent uptime for Yixuan's ultimate. On top of that, she also provides buffs for her, which is nice. Speaking of buffs, while Astra is currently the best supportive option for her, Yixuan likely still waits for a dedicated support. As of right now, however, Pan Yanhe is a good free-to-play alternative, providing up to 720 sheer force to her, which is one of the biggest damage buffs she can currently obtain. Shameless self-plug at this point, check out my Pan Yanhe guide right here after it is released if you're interested in playing him. A link is in the description. In the third slot, any support not providing defense threats such as Lucy, Caesar and of course Astra do well enough. While Astra outperforms Lucy and Caesar here, if you do not have Astra, or Astra is occupied by another team, what a surprise, I would recommend Caesar over Lucy, but both do well enough. Generally, as already mentioned earlier into the video, Astra is yet again one of her best teammates, being able to consistently provide quick assists to Yixuan to maintain her highest possible damage basic attack combo loop. This is however by default more difficult to play, and unless you want to make use of said loop somewhat well, which also means that the other character actually needs to be able to do anything during this time, Astra becomes much less wanted. Or in simpler terms, Astra mainly raises the potential ceiling Yixuan can reach. For the waifu enjoyers beneath us, Yixuan can actually pair somewhat well with Vivian, despite them not proccing as many blooms as anomaly teams. However, because of Yixuan being able to spam EX specials, you will actually trigger a surprising amount of blooms, even though they will not deal as much damage, and Vivian also allows for more than enough field time for Yixuan to manage her resources pretty nicely. I would however recommend Astra over Pan Yanhe, as Pan Yanhe does not actually do much for Vivian, and the team often runs into the problem of Vivian not being able to maintain even enough guard feathers to keep up with the heavy EX spam of both Yixuan as well as Pan Yanhe. If you like Qingyi, she is an option as well, but falls slightly behind, especially since she is missing her additional ability, which considerably lowers her days output. Due to a somewhat shared weakness however, Ether and Electric pair usually at least somewhat well together, but both Qingyi and Yixuan also value their field time, which somewhat conflicts a bit. In that regard, Trigger also held herself somewhat in my tests. Despite her signature W engine Staff Shred literally doing absolutely nothing for Yixuan, she does not require much field time and hence at least provided 3 stuns for her and a reasonable enough score to be worth mentioning. Mind you, this is with Trigger missing her additional core skill. It is also worth mentioning that Ether and Electric sometimes have a shared weakness, such as against UCC, which makes it a good pair. If you're short on stunners, Collida will do her job. Maybe just slightly too well. Not in terms of score, because honestly hitting something around 25 to 30k can be actually quite difficult, which is simply because she stuns so fast that you can basically not really line up your stun rotations well at all. Or in other words, other options exist and simply outclass her, but if you want to play her, go for it. Lastly, Pulchra and Caesar are options as well, either together or when paired with a support such as Lucy or of course Astra. Collida, Lucy, Pulchra and Astra also have had their additional core passive adjusted and now work when paired with Rupture agents as well, which makes them a great choice with Yixuan by default, well except Collida, and especially if you are free to play, Lucy and Pulchra will be really good choices here. Personally, I would recommend Pulchra over Lucy and Collida. If you are a new player, Ambi might need to take the place until you can get a better option, but she honestly did somewhat well. Regardless, I want to emphasize again that while her team options at release are at least existent, she is still looking forward to a new and better option, and as of release, Astra seems yet again like one of her best choices for her. If you are interested in how the different teams performed in relation to each other, at least for me, pause now. That obviously also means depending on how you play, you might perform better or worse, but this at least should give you a direction on what to expect. Lastly, let's talk about her pros and cons. She is the first agent of a totally new class after all, and hence also likely to set a new standard. But because of that, she also is missing a variety of weapon choices and teammates as of her release. She also requires completely new materials and is relatively expensive to invest into in terms of skill levels. On the other hand, as a unit on a Void Hunter-like level, as Hoyo likes to phrase it, can be pretty good, but her skill floor is higher than average with a very high skill ceiling, leaving a lot of room for optimized play. Shout out to Lin Null here, who is surely gonna make a 2-hour video deep dive. Right?
Hold on right there. 2 hours may be a little bit too long, even for me, but I'll do my best to live up to your expectations.
Her additional core couldn't be much more generic, and that leaves a lot of room for supportive teammates and makes it incredibly easy to miss out on it. Lastly, her VFX are super pretty and she is incredibly fun to play with a lot of depth in her gameplay. Before we end the video, I would like to have some closing thoughts. While I personally think this is important, please also keep in mind that this is my opinion, and if you have a different one, that is okay. In fact, let us know your thoughts in the comments. First of all, I can see some players possibly being somewhat disappointed with her performance. Not because she is bad, because in fact she isn't, but because her skill floor is higher than most units we have seen so far, and she is also still waiting for her best in slot team. Also, managing her adrenaline is important to achieve optimal damage output during and also outside of the stun window, and that means to get the most out of her, you want to make sure to trigger perfect dodges, switch out of her to parry with other characters, and also use her EX specials to parry attacks. Failing to do so might leave you with either not enough adrenaline during the stun window, which effectively can result in a damage loss, or you might give up free damage outside of the stun window by not utilizing her EX specials and EX special follow-ups effectively. Adding her swap cancel, heavy-ish optimized basic attack loop to that, and you might find your Yixuan underperforming by just a bit. Secondly, many people have already asked me how she compares to Miyabi. She is considered, again, Void Hunter level after all. And in fact, I've asked this question myself, and I came to the conclusion that I don't think it is a good way of approaching her. Actually, I think this is true for all Rupture agents. Because of the inherent mechanic of sheer damage ignoring all defense, Hoyo can very easily chill the fuck out of them by simply giving enemies a shitload of defense. While Yixuan, on paper at least, performs just slightly below Miyabi, if they decide to simply increase enemy defenses across the board, they would inherently nerf every other team composition not named Rupture in the game, which would just make her as strong or even stronger than Miyabi simply because she is a Rupture type agent. This essentially also means, while I never consider any unit a must-pull whatsoever, she could become extremely valuable in the future if we happen to get another bringer-like situation. And by that I mean a boss which shields Rupture and hence Yixuan so much that they are essentially just very difficult to score well against by a large portion of the player base without Yixuan. However, I want to emphasize this again, this would be true for every Rupture agent and not necessarily applies to Yixuan alone. And with that, we are finally at the end of the video. I will leave you with the showcase at the end. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please consider a like and a subscribe, and also let my editor know how goated he is in the comments. Special shout out to all of my Patreon members. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for your support. Peace.
That's a hot to fight.